probably most of the audience will live. So we'd like to start today's RCGS seminar. And today's presenter is Susana Tosca. She's a professor of media studies in Denmark. Southern Denmark.
Southern Denmark, yeah.
And yes, and this topic is transmedia research. So I'm very happy of this theme. So I guess when we will also stress about this topic and if you really please start
your
presentation.
Thank you. I don't know what to do. I'm really far away. Is it okay if I take it off?
Yeah.
Because it's easier. I have a hard time talking, like putting the voice out with a mask. I'll just sit here. Thank you. Thank you very much, Inu-san, for the welcome, and thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. Now, I think it's my third week in Japan. And I'm still a little bit under culture shock, but slowly recovering. So yeah, this is about the project which I'm here to do until June. And it was a collaboration. It's a JSPS grant. I think in Japanese it's called the Gakushin program. And so I applied to this together with Professor Nakamura. So it's very much also his help that has made that we got the project. And so thank you for your help. And let's see what comes out of it. We're having a lot of plans. So I think our problem is going to be to actually cut it down to something that can be done within the time. So the point about the project is to investigate mediated places. And I'll try to explain what that is with the city of Kyoto as a case. But the idea is to, like, the kinds of questions and the kinds of answers, hopefully, that come will be will allow me to do some sort of theorizing about mediated places as part of transmedia ecology. So this talk, and I don't want to talk forever, but I need to do some backtracking and some background. And some of you know my work, so this is going to be a bit repetitive, but for some others, I hope it's new. I'm going to sort of start by doing a little bit of an intro to the background. So what is the transmedial work I've been doing? Mostly is collected in this book, but it's scattered all over the place in different articles. So what is the background for this project, how I came up with the idea, and the kinds of conversations we've had already. And then I'm going to just show you the project design. And because it's my third week, I haven't really done much yet, so it's very open. And that's why it's so nice to be able to present it now. I'm hoping that I can get into conversation with a lot of you during this time, and inputs are welcome. So yeah, and you're welcome to interrupt me anytime. Please, clarification questions, any kinds of questions, but at the end, I would like to open up for discussion. So there was actually also the Replay conference. I did a keynote a couple of years ago where some of these topics about mediated place already were presented. So some of that is also here now. I felt I needed to backtrack. Right. So, well, it's nice to be in a room where I don't have to say what a media mix is. Like usually in Denmark, everybody goes like, why? What is a media mix? And how is that different from any kind of IP? And why do you think the Japanese are better than anyone else at doing this? So now, okay, I don't need to say that, but as you know, a media mix is really all over the place. So I'm not even including like fan-made stuff here. Like this is all sorts of official launched products. Like you have, usually you have a central product. Some of the media mixes are starting with games, others with manga or anime, and then you've got all sorts of sort of derived products and even sort of original products. So we've been doing some work with Professor Nakamura about the Gundam franchise, trying to cover all the parts of this kind of approaches, like how to how some of the elements are more important than others, how some of them are accessory, and how they all together sort of contribute to developing the universe in different ways. So I'm not going to go in there, but you know, in this kind of thing, I realized at some point by investigating the different kinds of connections between products and reception of products, like how people are interested in different things, that place, like the world, real places have also a role to play in this kind of ecologies. But I have been sort of ignoring it forever, really. And it started with talking to people, obviously, like, you know, there was this discussion online of people have been playing one of the Chacusas, I can't even remember which one. And there was a guy going like completely in shock. Oh my God, Don Quixote is a real place. I mean, they didn't realize because they've just been playing the games and sometimes they go in and they get some medicine or whatever. And it was like a wonder discovery to realize, but it is a real place in the world. And as you know, there is a lot of overlap with like real places in Tokyo or Yokohama or wherever the game is playing out, Osaka. So real places start meaning something. Sometimes they are a part of the game, and some other people have worked into this, like both about game landscapes or about how games reproduce the real world, more rather not reproduce, maybe simulate or reinvent in a way as well. So, but they are not just a sort of scenario that is empty. They also become independent signifiers and communication channels that work both in game and out of the game. And people like to travel from inside of the game to the outside and on the other way around. And then I thought, well, this goes really nicely with the whole media ecology, because the whole idea about Transmedial that I've been working with is about how it is a sort of shared work of the imagination, how our imagination is stimulated by some of the products we are seeing. And then we get this idea of the transmedial world and we fill it in with the different kinds of things we're approaching. So I'm just going to show a little bit about the approach. And this is like an old slide, which I've used with the students for a long time. But just to say, so this is the way I and Lisbeth Klastrup, we started working on this. Like we started from a very, you could say, close to the text approach, trying to analyze. So what is the transmedial world made of? So our first analyses were about things like Lord of the Rings. So what is the world of Middle Earth made of? Well, in the books, it's described there are some places, there are some peoples, there is a history, there are myths, and we try to sort of in a very narratological way, try to make a map of all the things that could be in a world. And then how the different texts of a transmedial world contribute to sort of shaping it and giving it depth. So in any kind of franchise or media mix, whenever you launch a new product, the new product has to somehow relate to whatever is there and either go in depth with something that is already there. Like let's say, oh, there is this secondary character. Now the secondary character is getting their own show. Finally, we're getting to know this character. Or we take a different timeline and we tell what happened in another timeline. You know all these mechanisms of world expansion. So, but the same happens in people's heads. So depending on whatever you've encountered as products, you have a sort of idea of this worldness of whatever makes the world. And the worldness is always in flux and in change, depending on which product you encounter. And there is always a component like in the real world as well. So we also have this model. I'm not going to go into that. That's like an experience model. But the basic idea about experiencing transmedial products is like the new encounter, like in this, let's imagine I just go to the Ghibli museum. The new encounter with somewhere I've never been before is going to be shaped with whatever imaginary I bring with me from having encountered the transmedial world before. I mean, it's a very simple idea, but we have like a very complicated model of trying to sort of pull those threads about emotional involvement and a sort of more sensorial, even though it says sensual there, I don't know, spatial, temporal, social, and all these things. So, we think that visits to the real world or can be a part of these kinds of experiencing in different ways. And that this is the last bit of the theory I'm just going to be very shortly presenting, which is like a theory about what makes people want to come back to the transmedial world again and again. we proposed there were like three basic desires of why you want to come back. So the first desire was about experiencing more, and that's again very simple. When you encounter something you like, then you want to seek it out as much or as often as you can. You want to encounter. You want more books, more films, more figurines, whatever. But some of these encounters can, of course, be with places, and this is what's behind people seeking out some places that have something to do with the transmedial world. You can go to theme parks, but you can also find whatever place where a film was shot and take a picture of yourself in whatever same position as the film characters. Or you can buy merchandise. And this desire is sort of cumulative and self-serving in a way. And the more we find, the more meaning the transmedial work gains, and then the more we will want to find. And that's obviously what producers want us to. They want to keep it alive. Like, if you keep on encountering the world in your everyday life, like you go and buy your cereal in the morning and there is a picture of your, like now it's everywhere, this spy family anime is everywhere in Japan, and I'm like, oh my god, I can't forget Spy Family. It's impossible. It's all over the place. So and this also has a link to, I believe T.L. Taylor was here presenting her work about theme parks, even though she has another angle. But this idea about sort of reproducing something out in the real world so you can approach it again. The second desire is that of transforming. So we think when we know something and we love it, we find some pleasure and we have some fun by producing content ourselves within the transmedial world. So this could be anything. It could be making a drawing of your favorite character, writing fan fiction. I've been working with that a lot. Making memes, very simple, making a joke with your friends where you quote something from your favorite anime that you two will laugh about and nobody else will understand. And places can also be a part of this, like in these kinds of videos. I was looking at all those videos of people going around in the different places that have something to do with games. There's all these funny people walking like NPCs in the real world and doing all sorts of crazy things where they creatively appropriate some of the, you could say, the aesthetics or the emotions of the game, and then do something with it, which they share with community. And this is, of course, playful, and you're not really like adding anything to the universe in terms of a new interpretation or anything like that, but you are, of course, remixing, twisting, extending, and in this way sharing with others like the joy you have in the world. And the third of the desires is, of course, inhabiting the world. So you can do that very often through video gameplay. But also you can do different kinds of performance, like dressing up and go into the places where something is happening, not just to contemplate it, but to somehow perform something. So this is also very much also behind a lot of game tourism or content tourism. So this is like the first bunch of background, and I'm sorry if it went too quickly. You're welcome to ask or in the end. So while looking at all these kinds of desires and all these kinds of different universes, for the book I showed at the beginning, we talked to a lot of people in all sorts of settings. Like I was doing a lot of interviews, a lot of, we did surveys online. We went to fairs, like, there is like a comic conventions. We went to Japanese pop culture. There's like 2 big fairs in Denmark where we were just standing there with our flyers and talking to everybody and sort of collecting input from people as to how to relate to these kinds of universes and why did they keep on doing it and why did they like it. And everybody kept on also mentioning places, and that's how I sort of got into it. But there was another project which I was here presenting a few years ago about otome games, like, the dating games for women, just a visual novel. Like, I'm not going to go in there. This is like a very embarrassing drawing of one of the first, trying to say, okay, but what is it that am I looking at? It's not just the game. If I'm going to take this seriously about it being an ecology of different media, I have to look at like what people are saying on the fora. I have to look at where they meet up offline. I have to go to the shops. I have to, so then suddenly become this huge field site where you don't really know where to cut it. And I was trying to cover this all. And at some point you need to stop and say, well, what am I going to follow? Am I going to follow the people, follow the thing, follow the metaphor? So for this project, I was very much focusing on like the intimate life, like what were women getting out of playing the games in relation to their own thoughts about themselves, their relationships. Like they would tell me about their relationships with their boyfriends and husbands and all these kinds of things. So I did forget place a little bit, but again, place kept on coming back. And this is what I was telling about in that replay keynote. A couple of you were at, I remember. So I'm sorry. It's like I was here in Kyoto doing some research for the Otome project and in Tokyo actually. And I went to one of the, I say one of the graveyards because all these Shinsengumi guys are buried all over the place. So there's some things in Tokyo, there's something here in Kyoto. And I was there just taking some pictures and then there were two women from Mexico. Well, I could hear it because I'm Spanish, so I could hear the accent. I realized they were from Mexico and they were talking. And they were like, gossiping about these guys who've been dead for 100 years. Oh, well, who do you think is the most handsome? And what do you think he would say about this and that? And I was like, excuse me, what are you doing here? This is crazy. So I realized that a lot of people were following the games places and had gotten interested into Japanese history through the Otome games about the Shinsengumi. And then I started reading about this and of course realized it's a huge field in Japanese studies, and a lot of other researchers have been working into this before me. Among others, Professor Sugawa Shimada has written about these rekijo, these young women that become sort of history buffs because of playing all the Sengoku games, and start going around in pilgrimages around in Japan. So I was also like trying to locate some other places in Kyoto that had a lot of meaning and that also receive a lot of content tourists, so to speak. So this is just one example, but there are other places I've been sort of having on the list and watching. So yeah, this is what I was presenting at the Replay in Japan. I'm sorry, I just cut it from the lecture, which was about, okay, so what is this about places and what do people want and why do people come to these places? What do they miss these places? The first thing I did for that paper was a literature review on tourism. So I was looking, the field of tourism studies is a huge field. So there's all sorts of approaches, like mostly you could have like a sort of experience economy approach, which is like the money approach, like how to make money. There is also like the more environmental approach. There is the cultural and cultural appropriation approach. But I was looking mostly at the sort of ethnographic perspective, which is about, you could say, the conjunction of people and places. Why do people go places? Why bother at all? What kinds of things do people expect to find on the other side of the world? And there's a lot of good texts in here about how people sort of in a way are searching for themselves. I'm sure this is not news to you, but how what you're pursuing is, in a way, for many people, it doesn't really matter where you're going, because what you're searching is yourself in a way. And this is a very simple way of putting it, but you get this idea of trying to avoid all the typical places, trying to avoid the trodden paths, as Brunner says, and all these people wanting to be special, wanting to be travelers and not tourists and all that. And this is very much connected to a lot of the people I talked to about game tourism, because they were like convinced that not the regular tourists don't know about games. They just, follow whatever guidebook and they go to the same 3 temples in Kyoto and they don't go anywhere. But they had like a secret key to more interest in Kyoto, to a more personal one, to something that meant something because you've spent so many hours playing this game. So obviously you have a connection, you have the right to be there somehow. So this was very much, I thought, in connection to this kind of idea of the self and how the pilgrimage becomes a sort of, a special form of traveling, which is historically it makes a lot of sense. I mean, the first travel is pilgrimage. That's how traveling starts, right? And there is, of course, a lot of literature in Japanese media cultures about content tourism, not just about games, but also anime, manga, everything. I'm quoting some of the titles there, and I'm sure since the couple of years where I did this literature review, there's even more there. I'm actually going to Tokyo and Yokohama to talk to a few of these people for a seminar and try to sort of see how both our research fields interact. But they work also with this connection to a sort of new spirituality, how people are searching for alternative ways of understanding the world, understanding themselves, and sort of how places become something else than just places. The two last things are not so much about tourism. They are more from a sort of Japanese pop culture studies that also refer to these kinds of imaginary spaces that people are motivated with. And I think it goes well with the other. There are also studies about like trying to find out why are people, what kinds of tourism there are, like this paper from Okamoto, which is about like otaku tourism. So, and it's very much about saying, so how committed are people? Like how hardcore are they? Are they casual, or are they more, are they really invested into this? And what kinds of things they do? And of course, this is very interesting from a perspective of tourism studies, and even like from, I don't know, municipality or like someone trying to attract tourism. What do they do? What can we offer? How can we support them? But I'm most interested in what the tourism, what they are talking about in relation to their own sort of transformation, you could say. So not so much how committed they are, but more what is the inner view of this. And this is not about tourism. It's just something I found on TripAdvisor. So it's just something, but I just wanted to contrast it with some of the interviews I was making with gamers. This is a quote from an interview with a Danish gamer that travels to Akihabara and says, well, I can see everybody's different. Like I'm 2 meters high and blonde, and everybody can see I'm a foreigner, but I feel a connection anyway. I feel that I belong. Whereas in Denmark, I look like everyone else, but I don't belong because we don't share the same kind of mentality or something like that. So for him, traveling to Japan and traveling to Akihabara was a sort of soul searching, a way of finding himself. And this kind of narrative I got a lot from talking to people about coming to Japan, people who like video games and like anime or manga. And when I say they see themselves as a specialist, not like a sort of arrogant view in a way, it's also, it's like, well, I am actually weird where I come from. It's more like a sort of acknowledgement that you have other kinds of interests or you have other kinds of values, and you are seeking for somewhere where you can find a sort of explicit connection or emotional connection. And in the transmedial experience framework, just to try and link the two things together, this is where fantasy, life, and place get woven together in unpredictable ways. So people will tell you, I have one of the quotes I have is a guy who had like a rant about Pokemon for 5 minutes, like telling me how he had grown up with this, how important it was, all the places he had been. And then he ended the rant saying, and that's why I became a school teacher. And I was like, okay, whatever. I couldn't really see, but for him, it made a lot of sense, like that everything was connected. Like really, it was like everything was nearly a sign of whatever decision he had taken in his path. And I was interested in that. So what kinds of connection are people making? And I'm aware of this being like a really fluffy research topic. But this is what I was trying to chase with all these interviews with people. So what are the connections to place and how it plays out with the media they've been playing and how it sort of works out? This is the work I was presenting at the Replay conference by looking at some videos and interviewing people, watching the videos, and getting some of the quotes were very, concrete or mundane about going to specific places and either being very disappointed or being very happy or annoying all your other traveling companions because they don't think it's that exciting. But other quotes were like much more going into that connection of their personal selves and this kind of development that I was mentioning before, like this one. There was one person saying, Japanese cities are like icebergs. You see the street in the surface, and there are like 7 levels above, 7 levels below. I feel like I'm looking at the future when we run out of place on Earth, or colonize another planet without a friendly atmosphere. So this is very much connected to what Napier calls the fantasy escape. You have been encountering this kind of sort of visions of another future, another places, another ways of living. And then they come to Japan because they think they can see it here. They can live it. They can be surrounded by it. And they sort of, in a way, they have produced it themselves, but with the help of popular culture images. They have these strong imaginaries that are motivating for them and their own life paths. And like the second one I really like is very poetic. All my life I've been looking for the place which I first glimpsed in Blade Runner, and it sometimes appears when I'm walking around in Japan. But this person, and I was like, okay, but what is the place? Tell me what is the place? Where is the place? He couldn't really, he doesn't know. He's just sometimes walking, and he sort of, in a way, I really like that. Because it's like the sensory, you are walking around, you are receiving all this input, and then the strings of your heart, of your imagination are activated in a specific way. And then you are suddenly in this special place. And of course, this can happen anywhere. I mean, it's not, but for these people I've been talking to, it happens here because their imaginaries are populated by the fantasy images from Japanese popular media. And in that paper, I was trying to say, what is this? It becomes a world that has more meaning than whatever you can see with a bare eye, and probably from anybody living in that street, it is just a street. But for this person, it is more. It is much more. And how to conceptualize that? I was proposing to say that it was like a thicker worldness, like suddenly the air was thicker with meaning, like in that film, if you've seen it, In Your Name, where at some point in the film, those two people who are living in different times can sort of touch each other, and this is like a sort of the time in the evening when there's still daylight, there's still some evening light, and the two worlds come together. It's something like that. You are walking around in Japan and you come here to find that. So I was thinking, okay, now I stop here. All this is the background, and it took 20 minutes. It's okay. All the previous work, I was very fascinated about this, and I don't know how special it is. You will tell me that. When I tell this to tourism researchers, they go like, oh, we know that, we know that because we've been, it's just not, they don't work with media, but they've been looking for, I have a colleague that has been working with the people who go to India for yoga retreats. I mean, that's also a very soul-searching or self-searching trip. I have another friend who's a historian and has been looking at the Grand Tour, like this thing like English people were doing in the 19th century, people I don't know, all the poets, the romantic poets did it. So all these kinds of soul searching, going to a fascinating culture is not news in that way. But I just thought it was interesting that now it's not motivated by, I don't know, Renaissance painting or poetry or Greek statues, but from popular culture images. And I thought it was fun to look at that. But of course, because it could be anything, it was probably clever to find one case. And then I thought, well, we are here in Kyoto, so why not Kyoto? I mean, Kyoto is at the center of a lot of imaginings and a lot of popular culture products. Actually, if you go all the way back to good old Basho and one of these oldest, and I mean, there's a lot of translations, but I like that one. So you are here, but even while here, you are sort of missing it because you have this nostalgic idea. Maybe it's the Kyoto of the past that doesn't exist anymore. Maybe it's the Kyoto in your imagination. So we are all chasing that, and we've been chasing it forever. So to look at place as a medium is not just to look at the place and describe the buildings or say, the municipality did this tourism campaign, but it's to sort of try and talk to people and find out what is it that you're waiting for? What is it that you are looking for? And for this, in this project, I plan to bring in some more literature, mostly about like how places transformed. And you have this from the field of geography studies and media geographies, which is a field of its own. We can talk about that later. But people like the work like Tuan, who has this distinction between space and place, or Lefebvre, that talks about space as a complex, dynamic composite. this talks about spaces as sort of lived place with a potentiality for action and meaningful construction, and all these sort of things. So I'm trying to mix all this together with the transmedial theory and people's experiences of places. Let's see what happens. So tourism is not just something to earn money, but as I said, to see what kinds of stories are there. And these are like some of the research questions. I mean, you always have to do that for the project, like how are transmedia imaginaries of place constituted? How does a place become a medium in fictional renderings across different media? Which characteristics are preserved and which are made up? How do transmedial fictions connect people to places, spaces, and in turn, how do people experience place as mediated by transmedial fictions? And now you're probably thinking, oh, you have to look at this, you have to look at that. There are so many fictions about Kyoto that I have to look at. so I don't know. I mean, this is one of the ones I've been already looking at because of one of those otome games. This one called Ikemen Sengoku. For those of you, it's free if you want to play it on the mobile. Actually, now I was watching the Taiga drama. Aki was telling me I was watching Tokugawa yesterday. And the films come out, like the butterfly film about Nobunaga. So, you know, the Ikemen Sengoku are all over the place, more Ikemen than ever. So it just keeps on going. So there's all sorts of media you can look at. Some of them are old and some of them are very recent, but it seems to be like an inexhaustible well of fictions. And I need to cut it somewhere. So I think what I'm going to do actually is to follow the people this time, like to ask people, so what motivates you coming here instead of whatever I think is more interesting, because so to get out of my head a little bit. The project has like 4 sides of it. You always have to make models if you want to get funding. This is like the trick. So there's like a reception side of it where I'm going to talk to people. And there is a survey. I should have launched it already, but I haven't. I am a bit late with that. I'm going to show you a little bit about the survey in a minute. And then I'm gonna like try to get as many answers as possible. And then I'm going to do some interviews with people who are especially dedicated. Like they come here with a sort of a very strong pilgrimage to some media image. Then there is a production side where I'm going to analyze reports and media coverage. And here, like Professor Nakamura's connections are really interesting because you've done a lot of work already. So we are planning to somehow merge our works, so we don't have to both do everything. You've been talking to, like, the municipality has had this campaign to get on the metro using anime characters, to all sorts of cross-media products that have to do with Kyoto. But we also are in contact with like game companies and other people that produce, even the film studios, the Shochiko studios where the students from this university go and work, are also producing these imaginaries because they are making a lot of films about the Edo period and other things. Then I need to choose a few media representations as soon as I know what people like, the most popular or whatever, but I would also like to choose something I like myself. And do some sort of in-depth analysis of that, and then going around places and doing field studies and observing and talking to people, which I've already started doing. So this is like the basic of the project, and there is a timeline. Oh, I had some pictures. Yeah, well, okay. Of some of the projects that we are already in connection, mostly through Professor Nakamura's generous contacts. This is the metro company promotion I was talking about. The other one is an otome game, actually, where the old streets of Kyoto become handsome men that you have to help and romance. The film studio, and then the manga museum as well. And the project is just like these 5 months are very intensive. I just arrived, so I'm just reading now, doing literature review and trying to get the survey going. And also, I've been doing some visits, but it's not very systematic yet. But this has to sort of happen all together before I leave in June. The survey is the first thing. I wanted to show you a bit of it. It's sort of, I know it's a bad term, but I call it the qualitative survey. I've been calling it that before. And the trick is like you ask for a bit of demographic information. That's just like a tick your boxes thing. But then there are like open text questions. So this way I collect a lot of small stories from people instead of just having, some choice, because the small stories are very rich data usually. I actually did another paper with Victor, who is sitting here, about we collected anime memories of people growing up in different times. And we had like 360 small paragraphs of anime memories, and that's super rich data. So even though you might not get thousands of people, but you don't want thousands of people because then you have to analyze all this. but like collecting small stories is really good data. So I'm asking people for these kinds of things in all these languages because I think I've already made them all. I just need to make that bloody survey exact to work. And the thing is that because I'm here in Japan, my computer is my university's computer, keep on thinking I'm a hacker. So every time I hack into the university's survey system, it sort of throws me out and wants me to log in again. And I need to figure out how to actually set it up because I can't go into my own system. The security at my university is too good. They don't even let me go in. So anyway, as soon as I figure that out, it could be that I have to send all the things to someone who is sitting in Denmark who can put it up for me because I can't do it. I launch it, and I mean, in my experience, whenever I've done this, in a couple of weeks, you really get a lot of stories if I can get it moving. And that should be the starting point for finding also some people to interview and, get the ball rolling with the reception part of the study. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And now it gets very open. That's also, by the way, in Kyoto, it has a little bit in Kyoto, it's the Persona 5 strikers, is the... it has missions like in different all over Japan, and one of them is in Kyoto. So, I'm very open. As you can see, this is starting. So if there's something very, very wrong or something I should know or something you would like to, I'm thinking I'm going to be knocking on everybody's doors if I can find you again. Now you all have the masks, so I don't know who you are, but I will find out. Please, thoughts, questions, literature you think is productive in connection with this, media, you need to play this, you need to see this. Places, people you think I should talk to or connect to. This is like I'm very open, and I have my notebook here to write everything down. So yeah, this is the presentation. Thank you.